You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology and talk about its implications for credit unions, the fintech world in general. And I think I can safely say we've got a pretty special episode here for you today. I've got an interview with one of the early leaders of OpenAI, a gentleman by the name of Zach Cass, who is now a futurist, an advisor to a series of firms, and a speaker on the circuit. I'll tell you a little bit more about how I tracked him down recently. Found him to be fascinating, and he'll be sharing some thoughts about both the trajectory of generative AI and artificial general intelligence. So we'll be getting into that just in a few seconds. I want to remind you, you can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group by checking out our website, big-fintech.com. You can also find new episodes of the Big Cast pretty much every Tuesday. We drop them here. Feel free to find us wherever you check out your podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, etc. You can also always find them on the Media tab at the Best Innovation Group website. And if you're listening to this right when it came out, when we're putting this one out, John Best, our Grand Poobah, and I will be out at the GAC conference, the Government Affairs Conference from America's Credit Unions, who are one of our sponsors, and we always thank them for that. So next week, my usual exercise out there, John and I are both going to be involved in a couple of breakout sessions, roundtables, moderation. But I'll also be scouring the grounds to see what I find to be the most interesting things that I see on the floor there at GAC. Hopefully have our usual interview with Chief Economist Mike Schenk on the economic update as seen by America's credit unions. So more on that next week if you check back in. But for now, actually one more thing I'll cover first. A new twist. We've been covering quite a bit about the Capital One Discover merger. Proposed merger, always important to say because we know there is definitely some regulatory overhang on this one, and we'll see how the FTC and the Department of Justice, etc., decide to look at this one. But we had a great conversation on our CU Town Hall this last Wednesday, and we'll post a link to that if you want to go back and have a listen. Our good friend John Ainsworth from Bonify, and a veteran of MasterCard as it happens, shared his thoughts on it as well. I've done a good bit of research. I've written a blog about this on the Best Innovation Group website. You can track that one down too. But I also saw some new information just recently that was a twist that I had not noticed before. And it comes from SRM, Strategic Resource Management. We'll post a link to their report on it as well. They pointed out that the way that the Durbin Amendment is written for debit, and presumably the way that the rules are written in the proposed Credit Card Competition Act, there could be an interesting carve-out that would mean that Capital One would not fall under the guidance of the other big organizations that are over 100 billion, which they would clearly qualify in the case of the CCCA, or the lower threshold for the Durbin Amendment. An interesting added benefit that comes out of this one, and I wonder if maybe, just maybe, that might be one of the reasons that Senator Durbin's been silent on this one so far, kind of figuring out how he wants to pull that one together. Anyway, back onto our main attraction. I heard Zach Cass speak recently at the Deluxe Exchange, which I've been going to for some time, a client conference that with the Deluxe organization. And I want to mention, it's a really good conference. They have done a great job reframing themselves. You go right out to Deluxe's website. They are now positioning themselves as the payments and data company. And they point out that this is not just kind of marketing hype. Payments is already their biggest business. They're still known as a check business, but payments actually is the majority of their revenue, particularly after they acquired First American Payment Systems. But they brought together some great thought leaders. I had not heard of Zach Cass before he took the stage. And frankly, I wasn't really certain what to expect. I mean, there's so much being said about generational AI that, he had the resume, but what did he have to add to the mix? Well, it turned out the answer was quite a bit, because my usual test is how many notes I take during a presentation. I took several pages. And I tracked him down immediately and said, listen, if you'd be willing to talk, I'd love to have a further conversation with you. And to my great surprise and pleasure, he said yes. So tracked down Zach this week And we had this continuing conversation, which touches on some of the things I heard on stage and went further than that. So let's just get to it. My interview with Zach Cass. I'm here with a gentleman who refers to himself as the chief optimist for artificial intelligence. Somebody I saw gave a wonderful keynote presentation that was really thought provoking at the Lux Exchange earlier in February. Zach Cass, thanks for taking the time to talk.
Thanks so much for having me, Glenn.
And I guess just to also mention, as part of your credentials, your background includes serving as the head of go-to-market for OpenAI in their early days. So you know of what you speak, I think we can safely say.
Yeah, so, to the extent that credential matters, yes.
You had just laid out a bunch of really interesting ideas that I think are helpful. One of them is that Moore's law is pretty well known about the rapid evolution of semiconductors, but you think that we are well beyond Moore's law in terms of our speed of progress in the AI space. Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, this is, by the way, I think somewhat contested, but the idea, maybe we should educate listeners on Moore's law, the idea
Sure.
that computers will get faster and less expensive on some time scale, and that time scale was figured to be every 4 years. Computers would get half as expensive and twice as fast. And we observed Moore's law for a while. Moore's law is one of these incredible ideas that's scientific and economic in nature, and we are observing something very different happen with respect to the AI trends. Now, Moore's law refers mostly to hardware, and we're seeing something, we're observing something very different, obviously, with software. But the models that we all use today are compressing, meaning they're getting smaller and more efficient at such an incredible rate that the price is falling like an order of magnitude every 4 years. So for example, GPT-3, when it came out, was 10 cents per million tokens. Now it's less than a tenth of a cent per million tokens.
And that's just within the course of a couple of years, not even the 4 years of Moore's law, right?
That's exactly right. So yeah, it's almost exactly 4 years, basically, is since GPT-3 came out, which is actually pretty interesting to think about. Anyway, all to say that GPT-4 is now less than half the price it was when it came out a year ago, and we're just observing this incredible phenomenon where these models are getting faster and better and less expensive at a really incredible clip, which is great for all of us, because it means that the access to this technology, the distribution of this technology, is going to get better and better.
You mentioned the difference between the software and hardware, which also kind of comes back to one of the points that I'd never thought of before. But you mentioned that the discovery, invention, whatever you want to call it, by Google's researchers of the modern transformer kind of laid the foundation for what we're seeing today.
There's probably no more important moment than the publishing of the modern transformer paper by 12 Google researchers in 2017. A lot of things contributed to that moment. So of course, there's lots of attribution to go around, but it argued that we were building the models in the wrong way, and that instead of building models that thought in straight lines, which is what we had done in statistical machine learning for a long time, that we should build models that thought in parallel. And it's a simple idea that worked, and it gave rise to it sort of reestablished neural nets, which had been considered DOA or not possible, not effective. It reestablished neural nets as the effective way to train these models, and then everyone started building transformers. And of course, GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer, and every model that we use on the market today is a transformer, basically almost without exception.
That to me, yeah, that's a foundational premise that I just had not, as a non-tech guy, that piece hadn't kind of occurred to me. from there, you kind of lay it out, kind of a logical progression from enhanced apps to agent powered apps, and then really, the AI powered operating systems connecting into a broader grid. Can you say a little bit more about that?
I basically spell out three phases that I think this technology will take. The first phase is the one we're in today, which is the enhanced application phase. Enhanced applications are convenient for us because it means we don't have to change any of our behavior. You just embed AI into the apps we already use on our desktop or our phones, and that's fine. The next phase is a pretty interesting one that's coming faster than even I predicted, which is the agent LLM or large language model powered agent phase. And you're going to hear this term a lot more, agents, than you've heard. Well, than you probably should have heard anyways. Because simply they're just making a lot more progress, but it's where the LLM powered agent actually executes commands on your phone or on your desktop so that you don't actually have to open the apps themselves. You can just interact with the agent and say, I need to do this thing, and a bunch of things happen. That's also convenient because it means we don't have to change our desktop or our phone. The apps that we need live there. We're already connected to them. They have our credit cards stored, etc. The third phase is the one that's interesting to me, which is harder for me to imagine, and obviously harder for everyone to imagine, which is the operating system phase, and I think it requires a whole new set of hardware, consumer hardware, because it doesn't actually comport to the desktop or the mobile device that we use today. But it's one where I think we can imagine AI operating as a utility, where it's a grid, much like the internet or the electrical grid, and things plug into it. And that in that world, I think hardware has to update. I think we move to a wearable or even an embeddable environment, and then everything becomes much more natural language.
How far out would you picture that being when you talk
Well,
about
there's a hardware requirement there, but I mean, look, you're observing Apple sort of already signal, hey, we're gonna build these, we're moving to wearables. And Vision Pro, say what you will, I don't own one. I don't plan on owning one. It seems like wearables are the obvious natural language future. It seems like glasses might make a ton of sense as a way to interact with our technology. And we just need to get the hardware right. That takes time. I don't know. My prediction on this is that basically what I'd say is I don't think we're going to use an iPhone 22.
Oh, okay, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
You threw out the word utility there, which also is the piece that I kind of keep coming back to. If the notion is that AI winds up becoming a utility, how do you see the regulatory environment developing? Because clearly there's an awful lot of noise about that already, and I'm sure it's going to continue.
Yeah, that one's super interesting. Um, uh, I think there's going to be a ton of noise for a while, and I think that there are going to be various members of all political systems are going to talk sort of in grandiose terms about the threats or the things that need to be done. And I think it's actually going to be kind of hard to figure out exactly what to do because, it's a technology moving very quickly. Clearly, there are some things that pull and that are really well, in addition to just being really important to limit, which are like, deep fakes that scam us all or that, are really nasty about people. Like these are things that are going to be like, obviously we should try to limit this. But I think the ultimate thing that Congress should, and I don't know if it will, but I think the most important thing that Congress and political bodies should try to regulate is the alignment problem. And the alignment problem is basically the question of, are the models aligned to human interests? In other words, it's not sufficient to just train a machine to accomplish a task. It is necessary to train it to accomplish a task and concern itself with the human condition. And
Tall order.
yes, yeah, well, it's the parental problem. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
every parent listening to this can understand this one quite well, right? You can't you need to train your child to be bold and courageous and capable and effective and thoughtful and caring and kind and empathetic. And it's not sufficient to say just follow all the rules. That rules don't actually govern, there's so much nuance in this world that rules aren't sufficient to, or following all the rules isn't sufficient to being an aligned human. And that's the alignment problem. And that's actually what people talk about when they talk about existentialism. Will machines kill us all? It's actually, will there be so many unintended consequences because machines are good at accomplishing tasks, but not good at concerning themselves with our experience. And so this is the thing that I hope is regulated among beyond anything else.
That's really interesting.
But the concern, obviously, Glenn, and I'll just say this, is regulating things like ethics alone actually just introduce all sorts of pig fat opportunity and special interest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think in those circumstances, you'll basically just see lobbyists figure out how to make it really hard for one industry or one company to use this technology, and people create just a really nasty environment versus just saying, look, we need to make sure that above all else, these models are aligned to human interest.
That's a fascinating way of thinking about it. We started by saying that you're the chief optimist, and I think clearly you are a very kind of pro AI in terms of its potential going forward. You mentioned the fear mongering and some of the things that go on, and you also mentioned to me that you think that the primary fears people have probably are not the ones that you think are rise to the top of the list. And you mentioned about actual evolution is one of the kind of central concerns you might point to in the future.
Yeah, I think this is a short or medium term risk. I don't think it actually presents I don't think this presents an existential risk to the human species. It won't surprise you to say I think AI might actually solve this problem, but there is a real risk that if we solve all of our problems, that our brains stop evolving, right? It is exposure to problems that have made us smarter and that have led us to build tools and machines and of course AI, which is a fascinating way to sort of explore the world through our problems. But it does stand to reason that if AI is the last technology that we ever build, and it seems possible that it is, certainly ever build on our own, right? We should say.
Yeah.
If AGI is the last technology that we build on our own, then by definition, the world becomes a lot easier. And I think that we already see this like what happens when we have a lot of free time. And because we haven't built an abundance of livable cities and walkable, bikeable, communal based, we're seeing a really strong waste of time already start to take over our culture. And TikTok is an obvious example of this, where you have people spend hours of their free day on TikTok, and it doesn't seem like it enriches their brains. And you can just extrapolate that a little, like, are we getting smarter right now? Well, yes, because we're still faced with a lot of interesting challenges. That doesn't mean that that will persist. And Wall-E, Disney Pixar's Wall-E explores this idea. And in Wall-E, it's actually really critical to understand humans aren't enslaved by technology, right? So technology didn't take over. Humans just sort of surrendered themselves to it and said, I want to lie on this bed and scoot around everywhere.
Yeah.
So I raise that as the principal concern of mine, not existentialism, not job loss, or I talk about jobs, identity loss is a bigger one, but really idiocracy. Can we avoid succumbing to intellectual mush because we've solved a lot of our problems?
I didn't mention the term futurist when I introduced you, and I think clearly based on that last piece, that clearly belongs in your job title. That's really really interesting stuff. Speaking of the future, yeah, this might be a good place for us to kind of close out too. Your prediction of maybe just a quick definition of AGI and your prediction of just how far down the road it is. You mentioned I think 2030 is actually maybe a conservative estimate.
Our AGI stands for artificial general intelligence. It's the theory that says AI will become as good or better than humans at all of our intellectual tasks, and therefore be able to train itself or teach itself novel scientific developments. And that's that flywheel, that you can extrapolate that flywheel. It just means that AI will invent a bunch of incredible things. Lots of people have predicted these dates, both directly and indirectly. John Maynard Keynes, in his paper, The Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren, picked 2030 as the date by which we would have a 30-hour work week and all these incredible things.
And just for perspective, he wrote that paper, what was it, back
in 1930?
30, even further back.
He wrote that paper in 1930, The Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren. It's a really incredible, basically 10-page paper that is just so prescient in so many ways. But then all these like modern futurists, namely Ray Kurzweil, but Peter Diamandis, among others, have picked a pretty near-term date. And within the AI circles, there's a real consideration that AGI is on the near-term horizon.
I didn't recall you put out 2030 as a nice round number, but you think it may even beat that by a year or two, as I recall.
I would not be surprised if it arrived as early as 2027.
Wow, that's amazing.
We are on an incredibly fast pace right now that we should be really mindful of.
Yeah, which again brings into mind the ability to do something on the regulatory front, which is no easy task. So, yeah. Zach, this stuff is fascinating, and I think it would pretty much be obvious. People probably want to hear more from you. ZachCast.com is the best place to find out more, correct?
That's right.
And you'll be you're available. You do speaking facilitations with companies and.
Yeah, most of my work now is speaking and consulting. I'm writing a book that comes out on September 1 that will start to leak, and there are lots of ways to hear from me or talk to me, but speaking is probably the best one, the most scalable, anyways. Right now,
I'll watch out for as the book starts to come out, and yeah, that's fascinating stuff. I also remember hearing you wrote a paper about how we shouldn't, be careful about anthropomorphizing AI.
Yeah, I am pretty concerned. I mean, as long as we've got a second, I'm pretty concerned with this idea that we start regarding AI as a human for all sorts of reasons. I think it takes the place of community if we do. I think it could substitute for community in a negative way. Obviously, there are some people who don't have any community, and that's a problem that we need to solve for, and hopefully we can figure that out. But I think it also introduces all sorts of complication around what rights should AI have, and assigning sentience or consciousness to this thing, I think ultimately actually complicates how we use it. And you could just easily imagine people talking about, we're overusing AI or we're mistreating it. And I really think we need to regard it as a tool to improve the human condition and or living creatures' condition, not just humans. But I'm most concerned with human condition, not protect AI as a conscious being.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, so much to follow up on, and I'll post some links that people can do that. Zach, I really appreciate it. Great conversation. Thanks.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Glenn.
So I hope you found that as fascinating as I did. I will also add this was recorded a day before this news came out. I think an important kind of coda that the news came out that Elon Musk on Friday, I'm sure you've seen this by now because it's getting a fair bit of press, Elon Musk has sued OpenAI. You may recall that Elon Musk was one of the original founders and financial backers of OpenAI. He split with the company and decided to go in his own direction. He's one of the many tech firms that's actually pursuing generative AI on their own. But his argument is that OpenAI was established as a not-for-profit to figure out how artificial intelligence could benefit humanity. He believes they've strayed from that mission. He's not alone in thinking that. I think he has a bit of a ulterior motive, given that he's split off and trying to do his own profitable aspect of that. I also thought it was interesting when I tried to find a little more information on this. I typed Elon sues into the Google search bar, and before I could even get to OpenAI, I got a long list of people that Elon Musk is suing. So they're not alone in their being sued by Elon Musk. On the other hand, there are other entities that are suing OpenAI for different reasons. Content creators have been lining up to sue them. The New York Times made press for doing this earlier, and they're not just going after OpenAI, but more broadly Meta and some Microsoft, some other folks, for basically using their content and infringing copyright to train their large language models. And a few more companies have signed on to that. The Intercept raw story, which apparently when you're talking about a digital-only publication, it brings even different copyright protections into the mix that even further add nuances to any kind of a lawsuit that comes out of that. And some pretty darn prominent authors have also joined the fray on this. John Grisham and Sarah Silverman have added their names to lawsuits saying, wait a second, you can't just take our stuff, read it, and then decide that you've gotten this information for free. So this also ties back again. We talked about this, I believe, last week, that Reddit, when they put out their announcement that they are going public, they touted their agreement that they actually have a revenue stream coming from OpenAI, that they are receiving money, royalties for the content that OpenAI now uses off the Reddit website. Another one of those interesting round trip ones where does Reddit get that information? They're not doing it from paid journalists. They're doing it from a community of posters who are not getting any money out of this. Back to that point, if you don't see who pays for the product, I'll let you finish that one. But with that, another episode of the Big Cast in the books. Again, my name is Glenn Sarvati. My firm is 154 Advisors. You can find me on LinkedIn there. The Best Innovation Group and I have both joined Blue Sky, which is now out of its invitation-only mode, and you can actually join them directly. You'll find the interface extremely familiar if you're interested in the short-form social media posts. And it's the same handles as we've had at that other one. So you'll find me at 154 Advisors. You'll find John Best at JB FinTech and the Best Innovation Group at Big FinTech. As I said, we'll be coming back from the Government Affairs Conference with lots of more content for you. So be watching next Tuesday when we put out our next episode. Again, big-fintech.com, media tab if you want to find our podcast and our archive of past ones there. Apple Music, Spotify, etc. Like them, follow them, whatever you choose to do. But as always, thanks for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.